right, so let's have a chat about The Wheel of Time, the Season 1 review. I have a lot of thoughts about the season, so let's just jump right in. If you don't know anything about the show, I did a review a couple of weeks ago, so please go check that out, and that'll give you a rundown of what the show is about. Overall, I liked the season. There are definitely some thoughts that I have, but it's kept me interested enough that I am going to watch the second season, and there are some things that I loved about it, which you can probably guess. Of course, all of this is just my opinion, and I also have not read the books, although I am partway through reading New Spring, which really is just Moiraine and Siuan, which delights my shipper heart. I'm going to start by talking about the things that I appreciated about the show, and then I will look at the things that I didn't like so much, and then I'll talk about what I'm looking forward to happening in the next season, obviously not based on spoilers, just based on what I hope will happen. I think one of the things that I really appreciated about the show is that there was a sense of this vast world. The depth of the world building is apparent, and you sense that there's so much more to everything that's going on than you actually get to see. Obviously, being a TV show, it's difficult to dive deeply into everything in the way that a book can. I can imagine someone who's reading the book and then watching the show, you are always thinking about all the things that have been missed out. As someone who's coming at this completely fresh, not knowing the world, not knowing anything about it, I felt that they did a good job of exposing what needed to be exposed for me to understand what was going on, and enough for me to be intrigued about this world. You can definitely see that there are multiple cultures coming into play with things like the people of the Two Rivers, with the Aes Sedai, with the Tuathan. Did I say that correctly? And it's obvious that there's a long history attached to each of these cultures, and I did do a little bit of digging after watching the first few episodes because I was intrigued, and there is just so much lore that you can dive into, which is very satisfying if that's your thing. The other thing that I liked is some of the characters I found really interesting. Obviously, Moiraine is my absolute favourite, and I think that's in no small part to Rosamund Pike. And as an extension of enjoying her character, I really enjoyed Lan's character as well, and Siuan's character. But for me, the character I love the most, 100%, is Moiraine. And to be honest, before it even really went in the gay direction, I was already loving her character the most. And the fact that she's gay, 100% just made it better. But it wasn't the reason why I liked her in the first place. It's just, I think I have a thing for Rosamund Pike. And also the character is also really fantastic. It's the combination. It's the combination of Moiraine and Rosamund Pike. It's just doing it for me. Love it so much. Making Moiraine the lead character, I mean, it is an ensemble cast, but she is really the main character of the show. And I think that was a really smart choice. Because I really like Moiraine. I also think if you're going to get an actress of the caliber of Rosamund Pike, you really need to utilize her properly. However, making her the main character has had some drawbacks. I'll talk about that in the con section. Overall, though, very pleased with that decision. As a side note, there is a Tumblr that's been doing screen time and talking time for each of the characters, which is really interesting. Even though it is an ensemble cast, Moiraine does come out with almost, I think, twice as much speaking time as some of the other characters, although there was a relatively even split between the genders, which I think is great, and that's not common, right? There is this perception, I've heard about the statistic where if women take up more than 30% of speaking time or screen time, it's perceived as if they're dominating. Maybe that's why I like the show, because it really does have a strong female presence, and also it has diversity. And I think they did a really good job of it, of mixing it in a way that feels right. I have seen some comments around colorism, and I do have to agree, the two darkest characters on the show have turned out to be bad guys so far, so I do hope we start to see some, in inverted commas, good characters that are also very dark. In addition to liking some of the characters, I also enjoyed some of the dynamics a lot. The dynamic that I probably enjoyed the most was the Moiraine and Lan bond. It's something that I can't remember seeing anywhere else, and I really appreciate this concept, as I said in my other video, of characters who are so deeply bound to each other, and yet it's not romantic. There is a tendency to think that a man and a woman can't exist on screen without them boning each other, so I really like the fact that it's clear that this is never going to be on the cards for these two. Then you really get to see this caring man taking on more of a caretaker role, which I think is fantastic. And in fact, someone on Tumblr pointed out all of the child caring seems to land on the men in the show. And I hadn't really thought about that until they pointed it out, but it's true. Matt is taking care of his kids. We see Rand holding a baby. Rand is raised by a guy. And in fact, the women don't seem to be concerned about childbearing at all, which is lovely. I think that we so often shove these storylines about motherhood onto characters. In this case, we get to see a slew of women. Not one of them has really talked about wanting to be a mother, about this being a goal for them. And of course, given the quest that they're on, it's probably not the appropriate time to be talking about these things. So that makes sense. The other dynamic that I really enjoy, of course, is Moiraine and Siuan. I think watching Rosamund Pike and Sophie Okonedo, it's like watching a masterclass. They were able to take every moment that that script gave them and layer it with so much meaning, so much depth. It was exciting to watch. Some people have pointed out the parallels between, not being able to come out as gay and the fact that this particular relationship is deeply forbidden. I can see that, but that's not really what I most liked about that relationship. What I really loved was how very clear their love for each other was. It was just so present and there in their gaze, and we got to see them be so different when they were alone together compared to how they conduct themselves in the world. The whole of episode 6 to me was just so brilliantly crafted, and it really allowed us to dive deeply into Moiraine's character so that we could understand who she was and understand her motivations, definitely humanized her. And as a consequence, I feel like she got the most development throughout the first season, which meant that when it came to the finale, I cared most about what happened to her. I honestly feel like Rosamund Pike carries the show so adeptly on her shoulders. And while the other actors are great, I have no complaints about them. I feel that they do pale in comparison to the ability that Rosamund brings. Her ability to make just a look conveys so much. And the other characters, I'm growing to like them, but I feel I didn't get to see enough of them to truly invest in what's happening for their storylines. Which brings me into some of the cons of the show. The biggest one for sure is that they didn't have enough episodes in the season. I know that originally it was planned out to have more episodes. I think that it was a really bad choice by Amazon to reduce it down. It meant that, you could see where they had tried to surgically remove story, and it ended up looking pretty clunky. It made the plot feel uneven and the pacing a bit off. It meant that in some of the episodes, it felt like it wasn't quite hitting it on the head. Episode 6 really felt like it was tight and the narrative was really clear, I think in part because we were really focusing on just one character rather than trying to push along the ensemble cast's characters' storylines. I wish that we had had more episodes where that focus was put on other characters in the same way so that we could actually care about them. Rand is supposed to be the Dragon Reborn, and yet I don't feel like I know him. I don't really care about him. So when he walks off at the end of episode 8, I'm like, okay, sure. I really dislike the way that TV shows have gone in the direction of a lot less episodes, especially when you're dealing with an ensemble cast and also pulling source material from 14 books. So there is this sprawling world inside the books and you're trying to condense it down, and it just doesn't work for me. So that is probably my biggest complaint about the show, and I feel that a lot of the things that come out of it are a consequence of there not being enough episodes in a season. I really hope that with the success of this first season that Amazon will greenlight more episodes per season. That way we're able to get more narrative in, we can texturize the world more, and that we really get to dive into the characters so that I can actually care about them in the way that I care about Moiraine, because she's been given the most substantial development. Now, because of the restriction of the episodes and them trying to do so much in so little time, I felt that a lot of the episode structure was not solid enough. I felt it especially in episode 8 because probably it's the freshest in my mind. The confrontation with the Dark One was pretty underwhelming. I actually minimized my screen when Rand was having the discussion with the Dark One because it was boring to me, especially since it was obvious that Rand was never going to turn to the dark. Given it's season 1, there's a lot more seasons to come, hopefully. But as a way to close out that season, especially since it was the major conflict, it sort of felt a bit dull. And the way it got resolved felt a little bit easy. The conflict didn't really feel like that much. He sort of fell asleep, decided not to turn to the Dark One, and then did the thing with the little sangreal. I think that's what it was. And then that was it. And then he walked off. The fact that Moiraine let him walk off, like, I know that Moiraine had just been stilled or bound or somehow wasn't able to access her powers anymore. But I don't know, you spend 20 years searching for the Dragon Reborn, he's right there in front of you. The final confrontation has not yet occurred, it's just the first of probably what will be many. And you let him walk away. And then you agree to not let people know that he's still alive, and then you light a land. Oh, no. Why did you do that? As a character choice there, I wasn't convinced. Maybe this needs to happen for the plotting of the series, and maybe this happens in the book, but I kind of feel like maybe it doesn't. Also, the Blight actually felt scarier than the Dark One himself. I don't know. It's almost like having him in a body. It felt a bit mundane. Especially when the leader of the Trolloc army is scarier than the Dark One. At this point in the series, I'm not really understanding why the Dark One is such a formidable force. He felt more like a formidable force before we actually got to see him, and now I'm just sort of a little bit underwhelmed by him. The other thing I found pretty underwhelming was the Trollocs, which it was a display for sure with all of the lightning and everything, but it also felt underwhelming. It felt anticlimactic, and I think that's my problem with not just episode 8, but just the sense that the show hasn't really found its footing yet, and it needs to work better on hitting the beats. As for what I'm looking forward to in season 2, first of all, let's establish whether Moiraine has been stilled or bound. Either way, I'm very interested to see how she deals with that. She's been on a 20-year quest. She's been exiled from the White Tower. She's lost her powers. She's been going through the ringer. So very interested to see where she goes and how she handles that. I don't think it's going to happen in the next season, but I would obviously love it to happen, is that she gets called back to the tower. We get a little bit of her comfort where Siuan gets to take care of Moiraine, and we get to see a little bit more of them together. I don't expect that to happen though, because I think they're going to hold that card for Siuan to call Moiraine home probably later in the series. But you know, my gay heart can hope. I do want to know how the Amelin seed is going to be the fall of Moiraine. I don't know if we'll get to see it next season. Possibly it's something that's going to build. But yes, you can see that a lot of the things I'm looking forward to are Moiraine-centric. Let's have a look at some others. I would love to see more of the Aes Sedai. I felt that the world that they inhabit was really interesting. I suspect we will get to see some of the Aes Sedai more. I'd love to see more of Alana. I felt that she was a good friend. I expect we'll see Liandrin because, you know, she's an oppositional character, therefore she will probably show up in some way to make things difficult. I also want to know how Egwene managed to basically bring Nynaeve back to life. That seems to be some really intense powers that she has. It looks like these two characters are shaping up to be incredibly powerful channelers. I'm curious to see how they develop them and where they go. And I'm curious also to know what that white crystal that Moiraine was holding at the end of the last episode, what does that mean? They said something about this should not be happening. I understood none of it, and that's probably because I haven't read the books. Very curious to know about that. And then I also want to know about those ships. And thank goodness they had that little tag at the end of the episode. I feel that it helped to tease what was going to come in the next season. And yeah, I'm interested to see how they're going to proceed, especially since Rand has basically run off. He's still the Dragon Reborn. He's still the one who needs to confront the Dark One. I'm assuming they're going to have to go find him at some point. But yeah, those are my thoughts of The Wheel of Time Season 1. Let me know what your thoughts about the season were. What did you like? What did you not like? This is also the first time that I'm doing an unscripted video, so let me know what you think about it. If you like this content, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. And until next time, lady lovers.